Greetings and salutations, my friend. I am going to do something different today, and something I have never done on this channel before. A reaction video. I have never done a reaction video before, and it seems that everyone on YouTube is doing that, and I am characterized by very little originality, and I want to be just like everybody else, so I'll just jump on that train. It is one of those Jubilees, middle ground episodes, and this time we have liberal trans versus conservative trans. I think that'll be interesting to watch, and honestly, I'm interested to what both sides have to say. I know Blaire White very well. I'm a little familiar with Sara, who's there, but it's mostly Blaire White I'm familiar with. I used to watch a lot of Blaire White's content. Less so now, not because I don't like her, I just watch less content of this type in general. But this one caught my attention, so yeah, let's go. Let's watch some shit together.
It is a safety concern for trans women to share a female restroom.
Okay, let me just answer. I'll be answering those questions along as I'm watching. It's definitely a safety concern. I'm not necessarily against trans women in female restrooms, to be honest, and I know that there will be some women who will disagree with me. That's fine, you know. What I want to promote on this channel is healthy disagreements and healthy discussions, open conversations, right? But I do think it is a safety concern for two reasons. Well, the first one is that, you know, the self-ID. You know, anyone can say they're a trans woman without being one. You can just lie about it. If all it takes is for you to say that you are something, then that means you are that thing. You know, just because I say I'm the King of England does not make me a King of England. So as such, I think that, you know, those bathroom laws, they can be abused in that sense. But overall, well, how do we solve it? Because I personally don't think that trans women belong in men's restrooms. Like, that's safety concern too, and that comes from someone. I used to be trans. I was a trans woman. I detransitioned, and that was like part of the reason why I have sort of personal interest in this particular topic. Like, I wouldn't feel safe in a men's restroom back when I was trans, and on top of that, I was also assaulted, right? And I know exactly what it feels like. Well, if you're big in size, if you have beard and all of that, a lot of masculine traits, you may be perceived as a threat. Especially to those women who have experience with assault or harassment from before. It's easy to establish that kind of trust. I'm very distrusting myself because of the assault I experienced. And I completely understand that. I empathize with women who feel like transgender women in the restrooms are a threat to them. I emphasize with that. But I also it's so quiet when my fridge just stops making that noise. But also empathize with trans women, because I walked in their shoes. I know what it's like, and I too wanted to feel welcome in female restrooms, because that made me feel like I'm one of them, like I belong, like I'm passing first and foremost. So how do we resolve this issue? Personally, I'm all for third category restrooms. Like, we should have gender-neutral restrooms as an alternative, and I think that's the best solution here. Or have two women's restrooms, one only for biological women and one for biological women and trans women, so that you, as a biological woman, you can choose where you want to go. Well, I don't think you should be kicked out of the restroom that was originally yours, and that's an important point. It was originally yours. You know, so I think you do have a say in the matter. A big say, in my opinion.
Can the agreeers please step forward?
Before we begin...
Oh. Very predictable, right? All of the conservative trans women agreed. None of the liberals, I think, went forward.
It depends, yes.
So I think that to start it off though too is it's not necessarily saying that trans women, it all comes down to self-ID. When we moved into a self-ID process, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of men just simply self-IDing into being trans women to utilize the female restroom and to harm women.
Or just be there. They're getting arousal from just being there.
You know, there's a photo or it was a video that went viral, I think like just 2 weeks ago, with some like whole man with a boner in the women's restroom. And there's just some poor woman filming it. Like, am I just supposed to like accept that this is here? So
Okay, couple of thoughts here. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with the video Blaire is talking about. If it's very recent, I haven't heard of it. I'm well aware of some other cases, like the one in the Korean spa, I think it was. Yes, there was a grown man with a boner in front of him, who sat like right next to a 6-year-old girl or something like that. There were cases in schools where girls were assaulted when a guy went into their bathroom pretending to be trans. And right off the bat, you know, I want to say it's not that most trans women are perverts. It's not that most trans women do wish to assault you. I think it's a very, very, very small percentage actually. The right wing pays a lot of attention to those cases, right? It makes you think that, oh, it's happening much more than it's actually happening. It's not happening that much, to be honest. Those are isolated cases, and let's treat them as isolated cases, but at the same time acknowledge that the risk exists. And what Sarah said, that it's not necessarily trans women, but men, like men, biological men who identify as men, who will abuse that law. But, you know, at the same time, trans women and trans men can be predators as well, because predators are everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're trans, if you're straight, if you're gay, if you're white, if you're black. Every single group, every single community has some predators, and that's just the truth behind it. And I think if you choose to pretend that and say that there are no predators there, it's far removed from reality. Every single group has its dark side, right? And I'm part of LGBT, and I think it's important to point out those cases, you know, all those bad seeds when it's happening, because we need to acknowledge that there's a dark side to our community, and we need to do something about it. And, you know, we need to clean our own shit, because if you let others do that, they will use it against you, right? When extreme right comes in and they try to portray all of us as predators, as perverts, that's when it becomes a problem. So that's why I don't want them in my house cleaning my shit, because they will throw all that shit at me. I'd rather clean my own shit.
I think there's levels to it. I think that trans women who are actually trans, you know, we're talking gender dysphoria, transitions, making the effort, you know, probably once you reach a certain point in your transition where you can actually assimilate within that space and not cause a disruptance, that would probably be the ideal time to start doing that, right? Whereas, you know, a crossdresser who is emboldened to, in this current climate, say that they're trans because now anything is trans if you say so, that person should probably stay absolutely out of women's restrooms, because you're there to get your rocks off and the women are there to take a poop and a pee. So it's not the same. And you know, I really empathize with women who, you know, have an issue with it. And I can probably hear some women commenting, well, how do I know the difference between a fetishist and a real trans person? It's hard.
That's a good question.
It's hard. However, that's the only nuance that I know to give to it, which is there's different reasons people are trans, and some people really are trans because they're horny, and some people are trans because they really felt that way from, you know, a young age or whatever.
See, I agree to an extent. Like, when you go to transition, and this is a fairly universal experience, you know, once you get to a certain point of passing, that's about the time that you would start going into the other bathroom, as opposed to not make the same sex uncomfortable. Once you reach that point in your transition, a lot of things change, but, you know, you start to see things from another perspective. You start to see things from the perspective of a cis person.
Yeah.
And I actually offer some solutions to this, because I believe the free market can handle all of this stuff, because in government-run and government-funded buildings, there should always be a third space for us to use. And I do, when I go to the Capitol and stuff like that, I always use third spaces. But I think that private property owners can make the rules for their establishment and figure out how to enforce those rules.
I mean, I wouldn't say third spaces for trans
exactly.
people.
Like, we're in a state right
general.
now. We're in a state right now where you have to allow anybody to use whatever restroom they want.
If you're a decent human being, you do what causes the least disturbance. So, for example, I filmed a YouTube video a few years ago where I entered a men's restroom just because I was responding to comments who were like, well, maybe you should use a men's restroom if you really feel like the way you feel. And so I said, okay, let's do it. Let's put a camera. And I was kicked out within seconds of the entire establishment, and it was a whole ruckus. So that's what I mean by, if you're a decent person, you do what causes the least amount of problems for people around you. And if you're, you know, a moral person, you're going to be conflict avoidant in general when it's something like that, right? It's like, what's the point of...
Yeah, a couple of comments on that. Like I said before, I don't think Blaire belongs in men's restrooms, to be honest. And, you know, there's a lot of trans guys who are very passing, who are very masculine, who are bigger in your size, who are stronger. Well, do you want them in your restroom as a biological woman, or would you feel better if they were in men's restrooms? Like, you know, let's say you haven't started on estrogen yet, and you haven't transitioned in any way whatsoever. Maybe you're dressing differently. Well, you know, if you go into a woman's restroom, that's going to cause some commotion, probably. That's why I've personally never done that before I was certain that I was passing. And I think that, you know, if someone would tell me that they feel uncomfortable around me, which never happened in my case, never have I experienced it. But if it happened, well, how would I react to that? Well, on one hand, I personally would feel offended at that point, because I remember how I was like and just how sensitive I was around this. Am I passing? Am I passing? Am I being seen as a female? That was important to me. But at the same time, I will also respect them, you know, like, well, there's a reason why they don't feel safe around me. But again, you know, I'm very small in size. Like, I'm not the most intimidating person out there, to be completely honest.
Causing issues for anyone, especially if you're really just trying to pee.
Just put
get
your
it
head
done.
down, go in, get out.
Right.
Can the disagreeers please?
One more thing here. Yeah, I think, you know, most trans women are not exactly flashing their penises around. They're, like Blaire said, doing their business and going out. And, you know, I think trans women has a very serious dysphoria, especially around their genitals. They're not going to be waving it around, you know. I think those people who walk into those restrooms with their boners ready, like it's a sword of sorts. I mean, if you already have a boner, it's probably because you're aroused by the very idea of walking into female spaces. And then, you know, you're parading that boner around. You're a fetishist of sorts. And I'm kink friendly, right? I care I'm not judging people for their kinks. I think, you know, we should do whatever you want at home, as long as you're not hurting anyone. Whatever two adults are doing that is not hurting anyone else or themselves, unless they want to, is fine with me, you know. But at that point, if you're voyeuristic to that degree, you are involving people into your fetish that did not consent to that did not agree to that. You know, maybe, you know, someone does not want to see that boner. Have you considered that? Or have you considered that someone there might have trauma related to that, sexual trauma, and just barging in and traumatizing people? Wow, really? Now, let's see what the liberal trans have to say, because I want to see the other side as well. They can have something smart to say too, you know.
Can the disagreeers please step forward?
I want to comment on Blaire's point. The one thing I kept hearing through all of the nuance is passability. Because
said that.
ultimately, when we talk about passability, it determines how you get harassed in the bathroom. Because honestly, if you don't look so passable or whatnot, people are going to say, oh, that's a man with a dress on, and then there's going to be discourse. But the reality of it is, honestly, who cares who's trans and who's cis going in the bathroom? You should be minding your own business, being able to pee and do what...
Okay, I have something to say. There's one thing I agree with, one thing I disagree with. Well, you know, some people will never pass. And that is true. That is something some people have to accept. That, well, unless you go for some really, really expensive facial feminization surgery. But, you know, you will probably look very fake as a result of that. And depending on the size of your body, that also may be a reason why it will never pass. And, you know, if that is the case, I'm really, really sorry about that. But then, you know, yeah, if we go by passability, well, does that mean that you should never, ever, ever, ever use those female restrooms? And that's why I think that the third category there is just the most reasonable solution, you know. What I disagree with is nobody should care whether you're trans or cis. Or, I don't use the word cis because that's not what biological people who identify as the sex they are choose to call themselves, so I don't use that. Instead I would say biological women, biological men. Well, if you're... why shouldn't it matter whether you're a biological man or you're a trans woman? That makes a huge difference. If you're someone pretending to be trans walking in there, that makes a huge difference. Unless what she meant by cis was biological women, that we shouldn't care whether a person there is a biological woman or a trans woman. You know, now that I think about it, I think that's what she meant. Okay, I think I might have misunderstood her there. I see her point.
Your business in peace, for the most part. That conversation around this man with a boner on or whatever like that, I saw that picture and I thought to myself, that's really a right-wing talking point and conservative propaganda because that's their ideology when it comes to trans. I'm speaking. That's their ideology when it comes to trans. It's because conservatives have a basic level understanding of what transness is in the first place. And with all due respect, I do not think any of you are basic, but they use you as the baseline to amplifying this propaganda.
Okay. Propaganda. I mean, that's all I hear, you know. A lot of people, whenever they hear something they disagree with, they will call it propaganda. You know, yeah. Left-wing propaganda, right-wing propaganda, this propaganda, that propaganda. Honestly, if you really think about it, almost everything is propaganda, actually. We are all sort of being brainwashed constantly into even functioning in society. You need to be brainwashed in order to function in society. Once you have overcome all of that conditioning, you might as well become a hermit of sorts, you know. But if we speak of this type of propaganda, you know, I have distrust of media. I have big distrust of, well, the news we hear. But I also have distrust of like alternative media as well, both mainstream and alternative. You know, mainstream media is lying on a lot of things, and both right-wing and left-wing media, they all have their own biases there, you know, they want to put their own narrative, their own worldview. But, you know, once you start distrusting mainstream media, you might go to alternative media, and you might be thinking, they are telling you the truth, how it really is. No, they don't. It's important to be skeptical of alternative media as well. That's why, you know, Blossom may be right here. Like this might be fake. Can we know it with certainty? She makes a good point. But at the same time, if there is a chance that it's true, we need to take it seriously, and it's important that all sorts of people take those things seriously, not only like those who are far to the right, because that can be used against us. We need to concern ourselves with this. We can't just ignore it like, oh, it's never happening, No, it is.
Was it propaganda if it's a thing that really happened, it was caught on video? Like it was an actual occurrence, it wasn't staged,
Okay, so it was on video. Like I said, I haven't watched this particular thing. Is this recent? Like, tell me in the comments, is this a new thing that happened recently? Because I really haven't heard of it. I don't know when this episode was recorded, but I haven't heard of this, really. I mean, it's not like I'm constantly following everything that's happening, to be honest. I have been quite preoccupied with my own things too, so...
It happened, and that's not the only, it's not an isolated incident.
But that's not enough for me to say, because actors can do that. Who knows, they could have been an actor trying to make a point against trans people. But this has always been our battle. It's just like, from what I just heard you were saying with your talking points, because I did understand what you were saying. I just got the word passability out of there, and...
Which I didn't say that word at all.
No,
yeah, okay, again, Blossom may be right. You know, it's so easy to fake anything these days in your mind. Believe it. It could have been staged, someone could have paid them to do that, you know. It has happened many times before. Someone tries to frame either leftists or conservatives in certain ways, to portray them in a certain way, to make them look a certain way in a certain light, right? It's not like it has never ever happened before. So it's good to be skeptical. It's good to be skeptical. So I'm with Blossom there, but also agree with Blaire at the same time. You know, I think if there is a chance of it being a serious problem, a serious incident, we need to take it seriously. Ignoring the issue is always the worst idea, and that's the issue I see with LGBT quite a lot. Just shoving everything under the carpet, under your couch, into the closet, no pun intended. Just, you know, so all those skeletons are hidden there, no one can see it. Like, it's not happening, it's not happening, it's not happening. Oh, hello there. Hello, nothing is happening here. Nope, nothing at all. That's how you get your ass kicked. Because guess what? Eventually, we are being seen as villains here. And that's not what we want. We need to go after those bad seeds in our community.
I'm saying
he
that
said
word.
passability.
I'm saying...
She didn't say it. He did. And the problem, the left...
Okay, I can.
The
I
problem
couldn't hear
with
it. I just couldn't hear it back there.
The
but
liberals,
no, what I was saying was...
liberals always use the...
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying you said that word. What I was getting out of what you were saying, the one word that was coming to me was passability. This is Blossom saying it. And so passability is... Passability...
Pause it, shit. Did Blossom just refer to herself in third person? I think maybe, you know, I should start doing that as well. Alex says maybe Blossom should check if she's outside her own body. Might be a good idea. I'm not dissing her by any way. She seems like a lovely person so far.
Politics is really a thing in our trans community, especially when we come to the debate of restrooms.
Well, you can say it's politics, but actually it's just real life, right? It's just about where you're able to assimilate to and where you're not. And I think one of the biggest problems in the trans community is the community by and large has seemed to reject assimilation and seems hell-bent on...
That's not true.
I think it's absolutely true, which is you see people talking about how you don't need to work on your transition.
Yeah, regarding assimilation, should trans people be assimilating or not? I can see both perspectives quite clearly, you know. On one hand, well, yes, I do think trans people should strive to assimilate into society. After all, you know, you're part of society, you're not something outside of it, and by thinking that might just lead to more polarization between trans people and the rest of society. We don't want that, of course. No, you're a respectable member of society, or at least you should be. But on the other hand, where exactly is the line where you're going too far into assimilation? Should you assimilate to the point where you want to have the same genitals as the opposite sex when you're transitioning? I don't think that's healthy. That's what got me into the mess that I'm at, you know, because I wanted to be identical to biological women. And for that reason, I, you know, have undergone bosom surgery, penile inversion surgery, and suffered really, really bad consequences because of that. And sometimes I look back at the time when I was trans and thinking like, Would it be healthy for me if I was just to like embrace my transness instead of trying to be a biological woman? You know, like you shouldn't be assimilated to that degree. It's much more healthy if you think like, you know what, I'm a trans man or I'm a trans woman and I'm proud of that. I'm not going to try to be just like biological women or just like biological men. It's healthy. I think it's really healthy having this sort of attitude. But then again, you know, I don't think Blaire is denying that she's a trans woman, and she has stated it so many times in her videos, right? Like, she's not someone who pretends to not be trans, saying that there are no differences between trans women and biological women. And there are big differences, and we need to talk about those differences. Because, you know, in certain cases, like when it comes to medical treatment, those differences can be life-saving. You need to point out that little detail that, well, you're not a biological woman. You know, lung capacity of men and women is different, and a lot of different things. For your health concern, that can be very important. Let's continue watching.
You see people talking about how you don't need to work on your transition at all to enter women's restrooms, and I think that that is so selfish.
That drives me crazy.
It's so disregarding of women who may or may not feel uncomfortable.
But the trans woman experience is not monolithic, so who are we to police transness? Why are we policing other people's transness and how they show up?
We have to protect women.
Why are y'all policing though? That's what I don't understand.
You're using words that we're not using. It's not policing. We're listening to women, and if you have 50%, we won't say 50%, but if you have a large chunk of the population of women saying that they are uncomfortable with a certain thing, a good person leans in and listens.
So why
they don't just
listening
reject
to other trans women, Blaire?
I do all day. I am right now.
But you didn't.
You know, what if most women do not wish to have transgender women in their bathrooms? Should they have a say there? Probably. Like I said, it was, you know, their bathroom to begin with. Isn't that an invasion of sorts if you think about it this way?
But you didn't, and I'm not trying to be combative or whatever like that. I'm just trying to figure out, you know what I'm saying, what the middle ground would be between you and I, because you said one side and that's great, but what about the side of trans women? If we're not bringing both sides into this conversation,
here's what I would say
then it is unbalanced.
Here's what I would say then, because
I also agree with Blossom. Like, look at me just agreeing with both sides, right? And I think you can have thoughts that are, well, seemingly contradictory at the same time. Because I can see both sides here. And, you know, what I think is a good idea is just having more conversation around it. Having more biological women and trans women to just sit down and talk about it. You know, just try and understand each other. And try to understand why they have those opinions about those bathroom laws. Because, you know, it's easy to jump into a conclusion that, oh, someone is just transphobic. Or, well, maybe there's other concern there, you know. Like in the case how the law can be abused very easily, how someone can lie and enter those places, those female spaces. And, you know, I think if you want to be a woman, if you think of yourself as a woman, if you're a trans woman, I think it's important to respect women, you know, in that sense. It's not just about you. You are now part of that space. So respect those women, listen to them. And I also would say that a lot of biological women listen to trans women, what they have to say, you know? Because I think you're that far apart. Biological women and trans women shared a lot of common experience. And I'm saying it as someone who walked in the shoes of a trans woman. And have spent a lot of time with women. 90% of the time I'm talking to women.
Because I do understand both sides. I didn't,
Me too.
You know, I'm almost a decade into my transition, which means I was one time a year in, 6 months in, 2 months in. So I understand that, but I also knew at the very beginning of my transition that if I'm not at a place physically where I'm not making people feel uncomfortable, or I'm making people uncomfortable, then that's on me. That's my responsibility to make sure that I'm going places a certain way to make sure that they're comfortable.
Because it's for your safety also, too, right? Would you also say that you're safe? Your safety plays a part.
You seem to be looking at through the lens of always trans being the priority, and I'm looking at through the lens of women being the priority here. There's plenty of situations.
Why? I just want to know
because
why
it's them who would
that.
fall victim to not actual trans women, as I said, but people posing as trans women. People who are
But trans women are also victims of that as well.
I'm sorry. I would love it if the two of you have said your piece, and I would love to hear
Yeah, I
else
just
to
want to
talk.
make this
Nobody
point.
else is
I just
talking.
want to make this point as well. But trans women also experience violence
Yes.
and also
No
need that
doubt.
protection. And so that's the
No
thing.
doubt.
Like, it should be an even playing field. I'm saying you're wrong, but what I'm saying is I would like to challenge you to expand to make sure you're being inclusive of both sides or whatever, because we have to have these important conversations between cis women and trans women.
I mean,
and I'm just gonna say, and I'm not gonna just say cis women. I'm gonna say women, biological women. I want to make it inclusive of everyone.
I think the middle ground, though, is, and I feel like I'm not coming at this from an extreme place. I feel like an extreme place would be like no trans women in the bathroom ever. That's the extreme position. I'm saying work on your transition, take it as your responsibility, and be respectful. And that's the middle ground, right?
Yeah. That's a very reasonable attitude there, you know?
This is a self-preservation issue, right? So if somebody's in the bathroom and they have a boner, that looks bad on all of us. And when people, when our community is not calling that out and not saying that this is wrong.
How many, I'm just,
no,
to your
I
point, how many cases has that occurred?
It happens a lot. We see it's happening all the time.
More than you think. More than you think.
No, I have to actually see. I have to
There are
actually see
Twitter
data.
accounts.
I'm sorry, because I just want to make the mission the back and forth goes everywhere.
I mean, there's Twitter.
It seems like it's getting a little heated, and I have an impression that it's going to get more heated the longer it goes.
Accounts with millions of followers that show this stuff multiple times a day.
Now I know what you're talking about.
And so we're showing that these types of things do actually cause harm to trans people. So if you're looking at it at a trans lens and to say, what are we doing? We need to combat that stuff and come together to combat that
It does
stuff.
not encompass the entire trans experience.
No,
and
you're
that's all
right.
I just want to say.
Yeah,
It
I think I
doesn't-
see a lot of different points from everybody here. Honestly, like I can understand like how some women may
Has the
feel
same name as me.
unsafe
How
with
cool.
men in the restroom. Men. When I say men, I mean men. I'm not talking about trans women. So being a non-binary person that sometimes has the choice to either go into a men's restroom looking like this. You can look at me looking like this.
It's just interesting that I thought this was a trans debate. That's what I
don't
thought.
even.
Non-binary
That's what I
people
thought.
are-
I will say
Savage. Blaire wasn't exactly the nicest she could be about it. But is she right? Like, should that person even be here? Personally, I don't even believe in non-binary. I think that both sex and gender is binary. Sex has some abnormalities, some variations there, but it's always a variation of something. XX and XY, right? You have some chromosomal abnormalities there and intersex conditions, but those people are just males and females with chromosomal or hormonal or gonadal abnormalities, right? But regarding gender, well, I don't think that gender is something separate from sex, but it's bound in sex. You know, it's supervenient on that, and I don't see the reason why it should be non-binary. Why there should be a third category that serves no purpose. We have natural psychological differences, but that is not gender. That is not gender. I think we should move more towards thinking that there are different ways of being a man and there are different ways of being a woman. You know, like the way you want to express yourself. Femininity and masculinity is a spectrum. I don't think of gender as spectrum. But I respect people who choose to identify as non-binary, you know. Like in the same way that I would, if I was an atheist and you, let's say you are a Christian or a Muslim and you do believe in God, I don't. I respect that. We can still be friends. And I bring that same attitude to this whole non-binary debate. I'm like, yeah, if you want to believe, that's cool. I'll respect you. I'll even respect your pronouns. But don't force me to believe in the same thing you believe in. But we can discuss it. We can discuss it on a metaphysical level. Why you think that there is the third category or more categories. I'm more than happy to have that discussion.
Trans umbrella.
No, they don't.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe you could educate yourself a little bit on that.
I think I
and
could
maybe
educate
then you would
you.
figure out.
I think I could educate
you know
you,
what
right?
the reality is.
I'm
and what
sure there's
trans
a
actually means.
non-binary Jubilee episode.
Do you think it was a conscious choice by Jubilee to bring this non-binary person to just stir that confusion? Because, you know, that opens up for this whole discussion. Like, should you be here in the first place or not? Do you think that was planned? Because one thing I've noticed about is that never actually says anything about those other issues they're discussing. This is the first time this person says something, and it's all about a non-binary, like, oh, I'm trans too. Like, why are you here if you don't participate in the discussion outside of that one little thing?
6 years ago, when I've transitioned almost 8 years ago, but 6 years ago, it was never an issue for me to use the women's room.
You know, it's such an interesting point. If you think about it, for a very long time, people really didn't have much issue with trans people as they do in the last couple of years. It's a very recent development, actually. Well, I remember when I was trans, and we're talking like 1 decade ago, I've never heard anyone talking about those things. You know, there was no talk about it. We didn't have this sort of attention. So why did it happen so recently? And same with trans women in women's sport. That has been happening for a very, very long time. It's not something recent, but people started talking about it very recently. And, well, here's my thought on that, right? We wanted more attention. We wanted more representation, wanted to be seen, all of that. And, well, you got that attention, right? But what comes with that is unwanted attention as well. Well, now you brought all of that on yourself, sort of. But then again, you know, I think this turbulent part of this history, this cultural war, maybe it's necessary. Maybe we need to do those things. Maybe we need to have this conversation, even if it becomes this turbulent, because a lot of people were just not aware of that. And, you know, I was born in Poland, and people there, like, they don't even know what transitioning actually is. They just think, like, a lot of people back when I lived there, thought it was like, well, you go to the doctor's office as a man, and you come back as a woman. Like, it's a common idea. You don't really understand what goes into the whole process of transitioning. I think the more people know about it, the more we talk about it, the more negative attention it will bring in general. And then again, you know, what comes with this negative attention? There are some good arguments there too. You know, it's not all just a transphobic attack on trans people, but, you know, how exactly do we separate between those people who actually hate you and those people who actually may have something reasonable and something smart to say? But, you know, people who might be concerned about the health of transgender individuals. You know, well, those surgeries, HRT, hormone replacement therapy, it all comes with certain side effects. Puberty blockers can be damaging to one's health. And then, you know, how do you differentiate between those who say it because they're worrying about people's health and those who just want to ban those things because they don't like you and they think that transitioning should be banned for that reason? Or those who are might be even disgusted by your experience, because those people exist, right? Well, if I was in your situation, if you're trans, I probably wouldn't be that sure either, you know? When you see those negative comments about yourself, you might become a little paranoid. And what happens is that you're starting seeing enemies everywhere, to the point where you're seeing more enemies than there actually are. You know, there are not that many people out there who hate you. There are not that many people who want you dead, to be honest. I think it's a good idea to stop seeing enemies, you know, and start making friends instead. Also, I think that, you know, it comes from a position of fear, position of uncertainty, and people don't make smart decisions or reasonable decisions when they react out of fear. You know, that's how Hitler managed to manipulate the population of Germany against the Jewish population who lived there. You know, it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for fear. And that's how they managed to manipulate people just a few years ago about the non-vaccinated people, right? Well, you know, scare people with this virus, and well, look what happens, right? Perfect example. And it's same, you know, same is happening here. It's all reaction out of fear. The way we approach the climate issue comes out of fear instead of, you know, being reasonable and coming up with a practical, innovative solution. We just rather react out of fear. And when it comes to this trans stuff, there are people on the right who will react out of fear too, because, you know, the media tells them that those trans people are predators, and they might start thinking that, well, they're all predators, we should exterminate them. Yeah. Think about it. They start thinking, trans people are predators, we should exterminate them. Yeah. Where will that end? That is terrifying. That is terrifying, because that can actually happen if we keep on moving in this direction.
Would literally drag me in there with them and say, girl, you need to be in our bathroom. And I was like, I felt uncomfortable back then. I don't pass. I know I don't pass.
I'm sorry.
So that's a me problem. And I'm not going to turn my fear of being attacked in the men's room into a woman's problem. It's still a me problem. So I need to work on myself. And
that's why we need a third alternative for the bathrooms, really.
I can definitely actually almost empathize with a lot of trans women and their experience in the bathroom, and a lot of the turmoil with going in, and you know, especially with passability. But the layer that I feel like in the conversation that's missing here is actually trans men. And also the fact that I was born biologically female, and a lot of the things that trans women experience of violence in the bathroom is what I experienced as a child. So the reason why my education here is not necessarily to create an idea that I need to conform to Eurocentric standards. Myself, I'm a 6 foot tall trans man, size 13 shoe, so I don't fit into the Eurocentric standards of what a woman is, and I never did as a child. I was you know, bullied relentlessly for this and isolated from many spaces. So this discussion about trans women being in the restroom also affects biological women, because guess what? You know, biological women come in all shapes and sizes. There are, you know, a lot of lesbian women that deal with this issue that I've related with and empathize, because we both get pulled out of the restroom and thrown in.
Okay, let me pause here. Really interesting what he's saying. Because, you know, once this whole trans women in women's bathrooms, once this whole debate gets so much attention, women who perhaps not appear female, but the way they look, you know, where it gets shit for that as well, right? Yes, some butch lesbians might be examples of that, or not even butch lesbians, but also women who might naturally appear more masculine, and maybe can be, you know, you come confuse them for a man. It can happen. What about some detransitioned women who have had their breasts removed, who still present masculine? Well, shouldn't they go to a bathroom for women when she's a biological woman? What I'm saying is, this is much more nuanced than we like to think. There is no like yes or no answer. It's not a debate that is of most interest to me personally, but I think it's important. I think it's important to talk about those things. And I respect this man's opinion. And I don't think he belongs in a women's restroom, you know. I finally got the hair out of my mouth. Feels pretty good. He is that trans man I think should have a right to go to the men's restroom. I mean, I wouldn't be able to tell that this person is trans, to be honest. When I'm looking at him, there's no way I would guess that, to be honest. I even thought this was a biological man who identifies as a man when I first saw him here. So yeah.
That layer that it's not even being discussed in any mainstream, that this is just completely wiped out, and that you're standing up for women, but you're not standing up for women children. You're not standing up for biological females that are children. You're only standing up for what really affects you. And it's kind of sad that the idea that passability is...
That's what everyone does. To work on your That's what everyone does, first and foremost, right? You care about your own people. That's tribalism at work.
transition, a lot of folks, especially in our community, have no access to finances, resources, jobs, to even get their foot in the door, to get access to hormones. So you're putting all of these barriers just for them to be able to go to the restroom, which is a natural thing that we all have to do. So what do I need to do? Piss outside? Because that's how I was treated my entire childhood.
I would. I just feel like when this whole topic comes up, like it obviously goes back to...
I'm sorry. That Blaire's comment, like, I would. It was just so perfect. It was perfect. A little cheeky.
Conversation, and it seems like the fear is like literally cisgender straight men who are being creeps. And
well, yes,
what sucks is
they can be.
Cis straight men can be like creepy, and then it's like trans women, trans men are like paying the price for that. And I feel like, you know what, that's what's really hard about it, is because then I think people get the idea, or some people have the belief trans women are just like, they're just men in dresses, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, like, for so many trans women and so many trans men, the safest place for them is the bathroom that aligns with their gender. And if you go to a place where...
Well, safest for them, sure. But is it safest for the others? I think that, you know, we should consider that too. But, like, yeah, there was a time when I didn't feel safe in men's restrooms, you know? And what was interesting is the time of my life when I was, like, in the middle of transition, because I went through an androgynous phase in between trans women and a man, or at least, you know, I appear man. I don't really identify as anything because I see it as pointless. I'm just a human, I'm just a person. But for, you know, some practical reasons, I think it's important to just, you know, admit that yes, I am a male, so I won't be going into women's spaces for that reason. But there was a time when I was like in this androgynous stage, and, you know, I was appearing female for a lot of people, but some people also thought I was male. So people were very confused by my appearance at that time, and I didn't know where to go, to be honest, for a while. Like, should I go to the men's restroom? Well, I don't feel safe there. Should I go to the women's restroom? Well, women feel uncomfortable when I'm there.
It's illegal to do that, or you have to go and like, what's your ID, or like your birth certificate. It puts you in an objectively unsafe situation. And for me, like, I'm like, if I walk in the women's room, I mean, I know I like look like a lot, like I look 12, but like I feel like someone would be like, get out of here, you know what I mean? But like, that's the vibe. Like, I think you got to remember, like, when we're talking about it and we're talking about like these creepy dudes like in the bathroom.
Here's the middle ground. Here's the middle ground. Y'all ready? We're gonna be so happy with this. This is the middle ground. We all actually agree. It's men that are the problem. It's not trans women, real trans women. However, the problem is...
They can be. Like I said before, trans women can also be predators. Trans women who really, really do experience gender dysphoria. Trans women who have always identified as their opposite sex. They can be predators too, right? I'm not saying everyone, not even the majority, actually very, very small part of it, like very small percentage of human population are sexual predators, you know? And among straight and gay people, those numbers are approximately the same when it comes to percentage, you know? So it's not that trans people are more likely to be predators.
Our community has really eroded any barriers to actually being trans, in the sense of your average crossdresser can identify as a trans woman.
But then it's not a trans woman.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way. I feel that way as well. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah,
however,
I agree with that too.
The state of the political correctness with trans...
I've noticed that the term crossdresser isn't even used anymore, to be honest. Like, when I remember when it was just a popularized term, and I don't even think it's an offensive term. I think transvestite is an offensive term. It's a slur, and it makes you look like a pervert. And I don't even think that all crossdressers cross-dress for sexual purposes. Some do. There are people who get sexual pleasure as, you know, dressing as the opposite sex. But that is not to say that all cross-dressers do that. And I think, you know, if you are one of those people who do experience sexual pleasure from that, whether you're an autogynephile or autoandrophile, well, my take on that is just embrace that, you know. Don't feel shame about being who you are, but I don't think you should be transitioning, I don't think you should be risking your health to, you know, engage in a certain fetish. Just cross-dress and stop it there. Don't take hormones, don't do surgeries if you're an autogynephile. Just engage in your fetish in a non-medical way, you know, for safety purposes. It is about your safety, it is about your health. But at the same time, you know, if you're an autogynephile who's also voyeuristic in that sense, you know, if you want to go into those female spaces and be sexual there, if you're getting sexual aroused by that, that's creepy. That's creepy at that point. You're going too far.
Community, you can't really say that. Like that
Wait,
person
is this person saying they're
self-ID.
No,
they say that they're trans, but they're crossdresser.
I actually do agree with you, Blaire, 100%. Because
wow.
That's one of those things. Yeah.
Great. You know, I love it when people can agree on something.
Told you, I'm
Let's
really
go.
like that. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes when we self-identify, some people can take advantage of that. And that is something, unfortunately, that we cannot control. But we have to combat it with facts, with research, and with the information that is presented in front of us. It seems like we're the ones that's teaching everybody else because we live in a predominant cis world. We're teaching them about us. And I just really think we cannot afford to be intellectually dishonest about our experiences as trans people.
There is something that I think we can do. There's solutions to this. Like I do think that something like you have to be on hormones or something like that for 2 years or something before you can even change your ID, like across the board. That would eliminate the cross-dressers from being able to go there, because then you can say, hey, my ID says this, and you can, and so it shows.
Interesting proposition. I think that people who seemingly disagree each other are working much better when they're interacting, you know? When you're exposed to the arguments of the other side and you're working together trying to find a common ground, that's where you come up with the best solution, you know? That's how almost everything in a society, why it's working, is because it was founded in such a way that, you know, people discuss ideas. It's not like my way or the highway, right? We discuss ideas, we may not agree on everything, but that's how we find the best possible solution, the best possible idea. And I see it here that they're sort of taking it in that direction. I also see a lot of turbulence at points, you know? And I still don't see Alexander engaging in the conversation, just coming here like, yeah, I'm non-binary. You know, I mean, I think it was staged to bring Alexander there, just for that specific reason. But yes, Sarah's proposition about this whole idea and how you can eliminate this possibility that might be a crossdresser, I think, you know, it could be hard to implement. Because, like, how do you implement that? Should every person who appears trans or appears to not be a biological woman have to go through an ID check when they're walking into a restroom? That's not very practical now, is it? I mean, it creates a job opportunity, more job openings, because hey, now you can apply for ID checker at women's restrooms. That sounds like a lovely job, honestly. And another thing I have a problem with Sarah's proposition is that, well, if you have to wait 2 years being on hormones, did she say being on hormones and like socially transitioning? If you have to be on hormones for 2 years and living as a woman for 2 years to get that ID, you know, in order to change your name and all of that, that can create some issues too, you know? Like if you appear female, but in your ID you're male, you have a man's name, yeah, that's sort of uncomfortable living with that, you know, because at your workplace, or at school, or anywhere, at a university, you know, it'll be a constant reminder, you know, that you still have that old name. I don't think it's a completely good idea. But she's on the right track. She's on the right track there. I think working a bit more on that specific idea might lead to a better idea how to implement that. But she's on the right track. I mean, wow. I like Sarah. I really like her. Alright, so my original plan was to react to the whole video. but honestly, I don't know how long that will be. I think I'll do another part, because I've noticed there was a chapter in the video about whether kids should transition medically. I'll do a reaction on that part. Maybe 1-2 weeks from now, something like that. Yeah, it was lovely. Let me know your thoughts. What do you think? I can't say I had anything against this participant. I think, you know, to some degree, I agreed with all of them in some way. I was able to see their perspective. There were some things I disagreed with. The only person I don't think should be there in the first place was Alexander. I'm not talking about me. It's like, that person was there only to stir chaos, you know, to just be there and like, non-binary are part of the trans community too. Maybe there are, I don't know. I think that would be an interesting discussion, but not for this particular episode. Not for this particular episode. It is an interesting discussion, but not in this case, you know. I don't know why Jubilee decided to do that. I think it was a weird move, to be honest. Alright, I hope you had a good time watching this, and you take care of yourself. And I will see you next week, so ciao.